We will start momentarily. Good evening, everyone. Interpretation services for language requested by registered attendees will begin soon.
Buenas noches. Próximamente se iniciarán los servicios de interpretación para los idiomas solicitados por los agentes registrados.
In a moment, you will be able to click or tap the globe icon with interpretation written beneath, found in the lower part of your screen.
En un momento podrá hacer clic o tocar el icono del globo con la palabra interpretación escrita debajo, que se encuentra en la parte inferior de su pantalla.
Once the icon is available, please first tap or click English or Spanish, then click or tap Mute Original Audio as seen on the screen.
Una vez el icono esté disponible, primero toque o haga clic en inglés o español. Haga clic o toque silenciar audio original como se ve en la pantalla.
It is necessary for everyone to select a language.
Es necesario que cada uno elija un idioma.
Please give me a few seconds while I move the interpreters to the interpretation booths.
Por favor, denme unos segundos mientras traslado a los intérpretes a las cabinas de interpretación. Gracias.
A couple housekeeping items before we begin. Our team would like to extend gratitude to the Communications and Translations departments for their valuable assistance for tonight's meeting. Displayed on the slide is a QR code. By directing your mobile device's camera towards it, you can access our Redistricting Policy Review portal. Within the Feedback tab, you are invited to provide any further input through the form. Additionally, the presentation is available in various languages under the Supporting Documents tab for your convenience. During tonight's meeting, we will have an open Q&A session. We will answer these Q&A questions live after the presentation tonight, so please send your questions throughout the meeting. My name is Scott Halsey, serving as a Senior GIS Coordinator on the planning team for Prince William County Public Schools. Joining me tonight are Mr. Vern Bach, Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Matthew Cartledge, Supervisor of Planning, and Ms. Tanya Allen, Facility Planner Coordinator. Prior to commencing, I would like to let our school board members in attendance say a few words.
And we're going to begin with Ms. Jin Wall. Ms. Wall, please feel free to unmute your microphone if you'd like to address the attendees. We will move on to Mr. Tracy Blake of the Neabsco District.
Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to thank everyone from the redistricting team. And I'd just like to, again, thank everyone for being here tonight. And I'm excited to work on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake, for being here this evening and for your support. Next will be Mr. Richard Jesse of the Occoquan District. Mr. Jesse, you can unmute.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the team for all the work and stuff that you put into it. I'm looking forward to this. I know a lot of you are asking for the reboundaries to be done. I know we have the one coming up for the new Woodbridge Elementary School. So that's going to be our first one, but I know there's other ones that people are asking for, and hopefully we can get those on the schedule. But thank you for attending and participating. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Jesse. Circling back with Ms. Wall for the Gainesville District, if she'd like to address the attendees.
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. It's great to be here. Thank you for putting on this meeting. I'm really looking forward to it and hearing, where we are with school redistricting, audit and development. I appreciate everybody who's worked really hard on this issue, and for those who have taken the time out of their evening to be a part of the meeting. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Mr. Halsey.
Thank you, Dr. Cartledge, and thank you, school board members. Tonight brings positive news as we gather to share the input we have received on our comprehensive review of our school redistricting policy. Regular policy evaluations are crucial, and we've assembled a team of experts to ensure that any revisions align with educational and operational excellence, fostering accessibility to high-quality schools while providing stability for students and family. Through the RFP process, National Demographics Corporation, NDC, has been conducting this review through stakeholder meetings, focus groups, and a literature study. Dr. Douglas Johnson, Dr. Jeff Tilton, Dr. Shelley Lapkoff, and Ms. Kristen Parks, boasting over 3 decades of expertise collectively, have guided this process. I will now turn over to the NDC team.
Okay. Thank you, and it is a pleasure to join all of you. And I have to say, this is a great turnout, so we're happy to see all the interest in this process. I'm Doug Johnson, and I will kick us off as we get started here. First of all, as you've likely noticed, there is the QR code in the top right corner. The divisions team have built a very robust website full of information about this process, materials, a survey, and other information. So if you want to dig more into this, it's not too late. You can still go to that website, fill out the survey, submit your questions or your comments about the process, and you can do so after tonight's hearing as well. I'm going to jump in. First of all, to get us started, I'm going to hand off to Ms. Kristen Parks. Kristen, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thanks, Doug. So first, I want to define the scope of this project we've been working on. We heard from one of the school board members that many in attendance are thinking about specific boundary changes. However, the project we're talking about tonight is about updating the policy and regulation, and the policy will govern the process and the criteria used in future school redistricting. So we're not talking about any school attendance area changes this evening. We are talking about the general process as the division is revising the policy. So for this evening's presentation, we'll start by looking at the timeline for this policy review process, and then we'll look at what are really the 3 components of the school redistricting policy, which are the criteria used to set school attendance areas, the community engagement that is the opportunities for members of the public to participate, and finally the process, which is step-by-step tasks and which actors are responsible for those tasks. And finally, we do have discussion and questions and answers. So this process of reviewing the policy began back in June at the beginning of the summer with an in-person public forum at one of your local high schools, was followed by another virtual public forum, much like the one we're on this evening. And right after that, the website that you saw the QR code for was launched, and a public survey was opened on the website. It's still open. We've received many responses and encourage you to submit more if you have not yet done so. And during July and the beginning of August, we held a series of focus group meetings for internal division stakeholders. And this is when we really had listening sessions with key members of division leadership. And this evening here, August 28th, you'll see we're on the town hall. And then the next step in this process will be a presentation to the school board on the findings and recommended language for the policy and regulation that governs school redistricting. On October 2nd, the board plans to take action on those proposals. So when we had our internal stakeholder meetings, this is a list of the questions that we asked. I mentioned we did a listening session. So depending on the person's role in the division, we had different breakout groups, and we asked what criteria are especially important in your role. How would you resolve conflicts between the criteria if they arise? And at what point should school-based staff be involved in the redistricting process? What might make a successful or unsuccessful parent advisory committee? And finally, what forms of community input have you found most productive? I'll pass it back to Dr. Johnson now. Doug, you are muted.
Of course, I did that. Just to see if you're paying attention. I'm going to jump in on the first of the three legs here, talking about the criteria. So let me get into slides here. On the one level, criteria are pretty straightforward. When you talk about different things to look at, they all make sense. You know, we want to, as you can see in this list, we want to have efficient use of facilities. We want to have students attending their nearest school. We want to minimize the number of students removed in any given redistricting. We want there to be walkability so that as many kids as possible can walk to school. And so on, all through this list. And these all are pretty straightforward. When you hear them individually, they all make sense. The challenge in this process comes because these criteria conflict with each other. The goal to have every student attend their nearest school can pretty clearly conflict with optimizing facility utilization, essentially fancy words for avoiding overcrowding and undercrowding. Trying to minimize the number of students moved might conflict with avoiding moving an area that already moved recently. Similarly, the most efficient transportation plan may not be the best plan for keeping neighborhoods together. And walkability may conflict with considering student demographics. And these are just some examples. Obviously, there are all kinds of ways these different criteria can conflict. And so one of the things we brought up was there are different options for how you try to resolve these. You can rank the criteria, which is a very strict approach and very hard to do. You can try to identify 2 or 3 tiers of criteria so that there's a high priority items and lower priority items. Or as most jurisdictions do, you can just list the criteria and then make decisions on a case-by-case basis given the situation and the communities in question at the time. Based on all that input that we received through those stakeholder meetings and through a lot of research into what neighboring divisions are doing that you'll hear about in a minute, these are the criteria we came up with. One recommendation that we took was to group them, not to go through and have a list of 20, but to have really 3 or 4 clear titles. And so first, and the reason that all these processes get started is efficient use of the facilities, trying to avoid overcrowding and undercrowding and to save to use the division's money most efficiently. That's the best way to put it. So that's really the key factor. And there's a little bit of flexibility there, but that's what really kicks off the process and is a primary consideration. Then there's a catch-all called local geography. And this has lots of factors in it. Trying to keep the kids at their nearest school or proximity to school falls in here. Maximizing walkability and trying to make efficient transportation patterns falls in here. Looking at topography, trying to avoid expecting a kid to walk across a river or a freeway or something like that. We also want to try to minimize the splitting of neighborhoods and avoid it completely if we can. Then there's also feeder patterns, trying to keep kids together as they go from the elementary to middle school level. And we want, where possible, within the other considerations, to have the attendance areas be contiguous. So they're easy to look at a map and you are going to the same school as the neighbor next to you wherever possible. The third one listed here is stability of school assignments over time. This is the idea of, you don't want an elementary school child to be moved once in first grade and then moved again in third grade. So the goal is to minimize or avoid, if we can, minimize it, moving children from one school to another, especially while they're in the same school level, either elementary, middle, or high school. And then one that's not listed here because we've been going kind of back and forth on different considerations, but that we did talk about in the earlier stakeholder meetings is student demographics, trying to avoid, certainly avoiding making any kind of segregation amongst the schools any worse. And to the degree we can within the law, and the law is very strict on this, perhaps lessening that. So that has come back. It's not on the PowerPoint just because of timing. As noted at the bottom here, efficiency is the key. That's why these projects get started, and that is the primary goal in achieving these. But within that, there are lots of considerations that can come forward. And that was our recommendation. And we are offering these as initial, and we're looking forward to your reactions to them and your feedback on them, because these are far from final. As Ms. Parks noted, these have not gone to the board yet. And so your feedback tonight on these recommendations and the recommendations you're about to see on process and community engagement are all open to your feedback tonight. Next slide. There we go. With that, I will hand off and to a discussion about community.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about both the community and the process, and they're very interrelated, as you'll see. Some of the things that we talk about getting community engagement also involves the process of redistricting. So to start with community engagement, the next slide, please. Here are engagement strategies that your district, as your division, as well as other divisions in the area have used. So these are perhaps obvious public meetings, or what we're calling town hall forums, which is basically what we're doing tonight. There could be focus groups, similar to what we did during July in interviewing stakeholders. There can be survey questionnaires or online submission of comments. Definitely a dedicated website. I think that is now very much commonplace, is to have a dedicated website where all the information and feedback can be collected. And some districts or divisions use committees as well. Now, our initial recommendation for community engagement, number one is to involve the principals early in the process. They actually were not involved early in the process prior. So we heard loud and clear from the principals and the school-based staff that that was important. They are part of the community. They have the ear of the community, and they are an important part of getting community engagement. Second thing is definitely a dedicated website. And part of that dedicated website is to allow for survey and open-ended comment. So that's a way for the district, for the parents to give feedback to the district. Third is town hall forums, like we have tonight. A new thing is outreach. There's a concern about outreach to traditionally underrepresented families. And we heard loud and clear that the parent liaisons in the schools were doing an excellent job in their communication with families that are typically underrepresented. So the idea is to use those parent liaisons to gather feedback from families that are traditionally underrepresented. We also wanted, oops, can you go back? Yeah. We also wanted to have parent focus groups as a way to get parent feedback. And finally, other options, there are other tools that would be appropriate and that the district staff could decide to use other tools as they saw fit. Okay, so that was our recommendations for the community engagement. Now for process. We looked at what other divisions were doing and borrowed from them heavily. It was very interesting to see what different people were doing in the immediate area. And so we looked at all of these different school districts. And pretty much everybody has the same general process. So first, the division identifies the need for redistricting. Once that need is established, then you have some initial scenarios or proposals that become developed. Those go out to the public and you get feedback from the public on those scenarios. You might revise those scenarios based on the feedback that you get. And eventually you bring forward to the board for consideration proposals and ultimate board approval. Now, within that process, it can vary from division to division. And I want to just mention a few of them. In terms of collecting public feedback, in Prince William and in Alexandria City, they have been collecting public feedback through committees by having a committee. In Montgomery County, the staff leads the collection of public input. And in all the other divisions, as best we can tell, it was board-led. So the board was receiving all the public feedback. And then the other thing to note is that's different is when the revision of scenarios. So in Prince William and Alexandria City, the committee decided what revision should be determined and what should be proposed. And in all the other divisions, we looked at the staff after receiving feedback, decided on what revisions would be provided. So those are just a little background on how different divisions do it differently. So here are our initial process recommendations. There are two ways that you could initiate the redistricting process. You can either notify the board, simply notify them because you're opening or closing a school or changing the capacity of a school, and therefore you're going to need to redistrict. Or the board can initiate that process because they see there's an imbalance between schools and they want to initiate a process. Once the process is initiated, principals are involved before and after the draft maps are drawn. And as I mentioned earlier in the community engagement, we heard that that was an important step that would be added. For plans which involved at least 15% of the schools or up to 250 students, so the larger redistricting projects would require at least one town hall meeting, at least one parent focus group, outreach to traditionally underrepresented families, as well as the online input. If it were smaller redistricting projects, then we're recommending that you don't have to have a parent focus group as long as it was a small project. One thing that's different in what we're recommending is that the facilities department can revise the maps at any time throughout the process based on the feedback that they're receiving, either from the principals or from the town hall meetings, anywhere along the process when they see fit that they should be able to revise the proposals. When the recommendation by the facilities department goes to the board, there will be a report summarizing the community feedback. In addition, the board, a few divisions had this, the board we're recommending that the board cannot approve a significant change to the recommendation without first going back to the community for feedback. And we've defined this as they can't suddenly move a neighborhood if that neighborhood has never been discussed during the process. And then finally, we have a streamlined process for small uncontested adjustments. So those are our initial process recommendations. And then the next slide is a summary in visual form of what we're recommending, and it's a little more specific. So I'd just like to walk you through the flow chart that we've developed. So all the way on the left, you can see how the redistricting process is initiated. So either a school is closed or opened or increases capacity, that means there's a notification to the executive cabinet, departments, principals, and parents, and the school board. The other is the school board can initiate that redistricting process because they just see an imbalance. And once that notification happens, you can see in the bottom, we start an engagement plan. So we develop that. Meanwhile, staff will go to the principals and gather information from them and get their feedback before any initial proposals are drafted. Once the initial proposals are drafted, 3 things happen immediately. Basically, there's a board briefing for information, just so that they can answer questions if their constituents ask them about the redistricting proposals. Second is a dedicated website, project website will be up and running. And third, we want to go to the principals, or suggesting we go to the principals immediately after releasing the initial proposals and get their feedback. At that point, the facilities department may revise the proposals if they see fit, or we can just go on to the town hall meeting, a parent liaison communications, that's with the parent liaisons going to the traditionally underrepresented families. There'll be the website survey and feedback forms and anything else that the facilities department thinks would be advisable. After that, again, things may be revised and they'll go to at least one parent focus group. There could be multiple parent focus groups. If the proposals significantly change, we suggest that it goes back to perhaps a town hall meeting, back to talking with the parent liaisons if we need feedback from the traditionally underrepresented community. And of course, it will be any significant proposal or any changes in the proposals would be on the website. Once all that's done and staff and the superintendent feel confident in what proposal to recommend or several recommendations to the school board, will be a report written and it will discuss how the criteria are met for each proposal, as well as what the community feedback has been on the proposals. That will go to the board for consideration and board adoption. The one exception is if the board makes a significant change, introduces a whole new neighborhood to the process, then there'll be a outreach to that neighborhood and receive public input from that neighborhood. And then the board can complete its adoption. So that's a summary of the process. And I have to say, we've been very pleased to be able to listen to all the feedback that we've heard, and we feel like we've been able to incorporate much of what we have heard in this process. And next slide, I think I'm turning it over to
Back to
Dr.
me.
Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Labkoff. And yes, it has been fantastic to hear from so many people through this process, so many good ideas. I do want to highlight, just to bring a little emphasis to the parent focus groups piece of this. The idea being one of the things we heard was concern about, well, the number's always set, not some places aren't represented, concerns about how they're formed on the committee. The idea of the focus groups is it's not a set number. It's very flexible. So whatever it takes to get all the voices heard can be heard. And it's also not going to be chosen by just the principals or just division staff. The focus groups will come out of the town halls and the parent liaison communications and the website feedback. So folks that are engaged at that point will be asked to join these focus groups for follow-up comments. So it's almost kind of increasing the opportunities and the numbers to be able to participate in this process. So with that, just a reminder tonight, the goal is to get your thoughts on this. Again, these are drafts. And so our goal tonight on August 28th is to get your thoughts, your feedback, your responses, and then we'll incorporate all of that and take this to the board September 18th, which of course is another opportunity for anyone with concerns or thoughts on the policy and regulation to share those thoughts with the board directly prior to the board acting October 2nd. And then, as you heard, there are projects lined up to kick off shortly after the new policy and regulation are adopted. Plus, I do want to remind folks, there is the website. So if you don't get your question asked tonight, if you think of things 5 minutes after we finish or tomorrow, feel free to go to the website, share your thoughts through the form there, send an email. You can see planning at pwcs.edu. The division staff and division goal here is really to be inclusive and hear from everyone who has thoughts to offer on this process. So with that, I'll hand back to Mr. Halsey and we will get into the comments.
Thank you, NDC, for your informational presentation and all the work you have put into this review so far. Before we go into our registered speakers, I believe we have Miss Lori Williams of the Woodbridge District. And Miss Williams, if you'd like, you can speak.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted. Am I?
Yes, we can hear you.
We hear
okay.
you.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm sorry, I can't, my speakers are off, so I'm reading the captions. But I appreciate all of the hard work gone into this boundary presentation. I'm excited to review the results with the rest of my board once we have the opportunity and you've collected all the data. It's important for myself specifically that we have equity in our boundary process and that we do the best that we can for our school community and our school families. And I just want to again thank everyone who attended this evening, all of our hardworking staff on the school division side, as well as our collaborators that are handling the independent process for us. And this is something we need to do to modernize our system. And again, I just appreciate all the hard work. And I hope anyone who attended has any questions, please feel free to use that QR and code and send them to our amazing staff for review. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We will now invite the 6 registered speakers to address the floor. Following their contributions, we welcome anyone else who wishes to speak tonight. To indicate your desire to speak during the session, kindly utilize the raise hand icon. Now I'll pass the floor over to Ms. Tanya Allen, who will facilitate the introduction of our registered speakers tonight.
Good evening. There are 6 people signed up to speak this evening. Your name will be called in the order in which you signed up to speak. When I call your name, I will unmute your microphone. At that time, you will have up to 3 minutes to speak. If for some reason you do not begin speaking audibly or are having difficulty, I'll move on to the next speaker and come back to you at the end. Thank you, and we will get started with Rahima Jahini. Rahima Jahini. I don't see them in our list of participants, so I will move on to Shelley Anderson. I also don't see Shelley Anderson in our list of participants, so I will move on to Joshua Williams.
Hey, thank you very much for your time and consideration. Just got a question in two parts, if I may. Thank you for going over what criteria goes through the calculus of rezoning. You said yourself that it is impossible to have all of these items reconcile. So the first question is, from a weighting standpoint, when criteria come into conflict, how do you decide which criteria carries more weight and is thus more important? And the second question I had is, any redistricting efforts? I've heard rumor that those could drive students to switch schools in the middle of the year. Can you confirm or deny that that will happen? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll tackle the second one first. That's the easy question. It would not occur during the middle of a school year. The implementation of redistricting would be effective for a future school year from the very beginning of the school year. And then when the question you're raising is one of the most difficult ones, and we've heard it from community members, from staff members. What do you do when these criteria are in conflict with one another? And spoiler alert, they're often in conflict with one another. So in terms of prioritization, we are striving to prioritize balancing of enrollment as one of the top tier criteria, especially when we are opening a new school. New schools these days are more expensive than ever. So as we are trying to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars when a new school is opened and warranted, we definitely want to leverage and utilize that space as much as possible. And then the other criteria really falls under that local geography. You know, we want students to attend close schools when possible. And in past redistrictings, we've provided project websites that show that it's not always possible for students to attend their closest school, simply because of the unevenness of populations throughout the county. Some schools might be at 140% of capacity if every child attended the closest school, while others might be at 60% of capacity. So in that other instance of, these criteria kind of in conflict with each other, again, we're going to try to consider each of the criteria to balance enrollment, allow students to attend the closest school possible to their neighborhood. And then when we speak about student demographics, we lean heavily on what is legally permissible about the demographic composition. And in general, if students are attending their closest school, that's one way that we know that we're at least on the right path to supporting that demographic variable. I hope that answers your question. And again, thank you for being here this evening.
That does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cartledge. Our next speaker is Tony Whitehead.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Sorry, it's another meeting. I guess my one is what lessons for the school board, zoning, planning committees have been learned from the Potomac Shores community, specifically Covington Harper. My understanding as the community was getting built, obviously due to low enrollment from families first moving in, school boundary was set for outside the neighborhood as well as inside the neighborhood. Makes complete sense. Completely agree with that. My question is, what type of planning or forecasting was or was not used to determine how long it would take before the school will become over capacity? And to the extent where having trailers in front of the school is not just become a norm, it's become accepted from what I can tell. So I've spoken with other families in the community, fellow Prince William County taxpayers who feel as in their family and their child's best interest to pay for a private school to avoid sending their child to a school that's way over capacity, while other schools in the local area are not nearly anywhere near the same capacity. Now, I know it's part science, part art. I get that, but I hope a lot of lessons have been learned for the future as Prince William County continues to grow, that these same, from what I can tell, mistakes that were made aren't made again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony, for that. And thanks for leveraging the Q&A as well. I appreciate your question there. And so 2 lessons that come to my mind are ones that I'll share first. The first is that the projection model to project K-12 students was completely redesigned last fall. That was after the prior model overprojected the division's enrollment significantly. So we redesigned the entire model from the ground up, and we used 2 different consulting firms as sounding boards to gain insights and glean industry best practices. And then we married that into a proprietary model that is used to project K-12 enrollment here in PWCS. And I'm happy to report that it has done so much better this year than what we had before. And that very model was implemented last year for capital improvement program planning. And that model is what suggested for the first time that Potomac Shores area elementary school needed to be larger so that when it opens, it's not overcrowded soon thereafter. So that model supported increasing the size of that school by about 300 seats. And those are 2 key lessons that we've learned. I think that we are continually learning, and we strive to offer a better service and product every year. And again, just want to say thank you for being here this evening, Tony.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kyle Ellingson.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hey, thank you for the opportunity to talk. I really appreciate Tony also volunteering to talk. We're from the same community. My original framing of my question was going to be community specific, but after listening to the presentation, I'll rescope my questioning a little bit. I'm not going to discuss how we got here, but I guess the way ahead, and specifically the way that the current process is written, seems more suggestive rather than compliance to adhere. For instance, the first one is, let me see here, attempt to balance enrollments within 15% of overall capacity utilization of the affected schools. My child's school currently is at, I believe, 130% or larger, which, as the people on the committee probably know at this point, is severely overcrowded. Every other line except for one has the word attempt in it. So I guess my major question, since Tony took the forecasting question, which I thought was a great is how is the policy, how does the consulting firm think that the policy is going to be written to be more mandate-based, will accomplish this rather than suggestive of making attempts? I hear what's been said numerous times about it being a balancing act, but there's certain factors in here that have empirical research that says that it'll negatively impact the child more than the other factors will positively benefit other children, namely the overcrowding. So essentially the weighting and the mandation from the school board while drawing these boundaries. What's in the policy for that currently? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll hop in to clarify that element that's in the existing regulation 264-1. So the regulation with the 15% element is specific to when redistricting is underway and for the first 3 years after the boundaries have been ratified for the school by the school board. The other criteria, as you identified, are less definitive from that first one. But the first one, when read in totality, mentions that it's intended to be balanced for the first 3 years after the school is opened or after the boundaries go in effect. I'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson to mention how that is evolving into what is going to be proposed to the board next month.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Kyle brings up a issue that we heard about a lot through this process about schools become crowded fairly quickly. And so, as you know, the current language is kind of a aim for plus or minus 15%. One of the things we realized as we looked into this process is undercrowding can be a problem because you end up kind of not using division resources and money efficiently. But overcrowding is a much bigger problem. As you mentioned, that really hits the kids and you get crowded. So the draft language that we're working on would say, rather than plus or minus 15%, it'll say the plan should be no more than 5% over that ideal number. So really reining in the potential for it to get too big, but allowing a 15 to 20% under. So there's still that flexibility in the plan, but it shifts it in favor of avoiding overcrowding pretty significantly. So that would become not an absolute requirement, but as Dr. Cartledge mentioned, that becomes, instead of just one of the considerations, it becomes the top consideration. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more about seeing the policy itself in the future and more discussions, because it sounds like the feedback loop for the community has been at the forefront of the suggestions, and I appreciate that. Looking forward to talking with the school board in the future.
Yeah, thank you for being here this evening, Kyle.
Yep.
Thank you. The next speaker is Carlos Gonzalez. And I do not see Carlos listed in our participants. So that concludes the speakers that signed up before the meeting this evening. Thank you all for participating, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Halsey.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We do have 2 people with their hand raised currently, and we will give them an opportunity to speak. If you would like to speak as well, if you would use that raise hand icon, and we will start calling on each individual as we see them in our queue. Miss Williams. You should have.
Thank you. I didn't intend. Sorry, I didn't intend to raise my hand again. I switched from my computer to my phone so I could hear everyone instead of reading the caption. But I just want to thank everyone again for attending. And boundaries are a complicated process. So please, if you're on this meeting and you're interested further in boundaries, I would encourage you to reach out to your school board member, but also look at the accountability tab on our website so that you could see more detailed information about the current school ratios, and the upcoming meetings will speak more to boundary processes as well. So that's helpful information that may not be found here, particularly at this meeting. So thank you again. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We have Miranda Smith. You have your hand raised to speak. I will unmute your mic.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for taking my question. And again, I utilized the chat as best I could, but I did still have an additional question. My question is the proposal going to speak to any ad hoc or emergency rezoning issues that may occur should the current plan that's in place not work out as initially planned?
So I can address that, and Dr. Carlich can jump into. So yes, one of the things actually we found as we looked at the other divisions that was mentioned earlier is that there usually is an emergency provision. There's both some administrative cleanup options that really don't affect any students, and then there's an emergency provision that really isn't in the current policy. So there is a provision added into that. It would lead to a very streamlined process. Talking about notification to the schools and then going, if it's a real emergency, straight to the board for action. So yes, there is a provision. I think it's more, typically the emergency clauses are triggered because some natural storm or something washed out the road and the school's no longer accessible. They have to quickly reallocate those students. But there is an emergency provision in there, along with provisions for no student realignments and small realignments. That is a more streamlined process.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say too. Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for mentioning that. And I see another question on here. The question is, how is a redistricting committee selected and overseen to ensure they are following the new policy? And I think this would be a great question to answer live for everyone. So what we're proposing is that in these larger scale school redistrictings, those that are affecting more than 250 students, those that are affecting more than 15% of a school's student population. One of the initial engagement elements that we will use is a town hall meeting structured very similar to this one tonight. So as we have some attendees here this evening, some of you could be ones who we would invite to serve on that parent-led focus group, because we've already made that connection with you and see that you have a vested interest in school redistricting. Additionally, we could be working with the principals of the schools involved, and they might have some parents, grandparents, guardians who they recommend would offer a voice on this focus group. So we could extend an invitation that way. Additionally, another example might be working with the parent liaison at the school and finding out some names through those team members, and we could extend invitations to those individuals to be on the parent focus group. Now, one of the things that is different about the focus groups that we're proposing in this rewrite is that they're really serving as sounding boards. We're bringing proposals to this group of parents and guardians and asking for feedback on the proposals in front of them. This is a deviation from how boundary planning committees were used in the past, where it was those 15 or fewer individuals who were then generating new proposals. So in this scenario, in this proposed process, the staff are generating the proposals, and then the focus group is an additional sounding board that we can use feedback from. And that feedback that we receive, it might lead to additional revisions or additional proposals. And it might also not. It might then from that point go to the board for the board's review. So that's kind of the way that the focus groups are being used now. And then asking, you know, how do we ensure that those focus groups are adhering to this new policy? Really, they're there in an advisory or sounding board capacity to provide feedback back to planning staff. So they're not being tasked with creating new plans, so they don't necessarily have to be as versed in what is in this proposal of policy and regulation. They just need to provide feedback and serve as that sounding board. And I will throw this other question that we have over to NDC with the research that they've done. One of our attendees asked, what is the definition of a traditionally underrepresented community?
Yeah. Happy to comment on that. And then Dr. Labkoff and Ms. Sparks may have comments as well. The term comes from folks, and we heard about this a lot, both from stakeholders here in Prince William and from other jurisdictions. There is a population out there that is not comfortable coming to a town hall, standing up in front of a room of people or a Zoom room of people and speaking out. But they still should be heard. They still are an important voice. They still have their own concerns. And so we're kind of latching on to what the division has already launched in this parent liaisons, which is a non-traditional channel reaching out to these folks who traditionally don't participate in bigger meetings or aren't comfortable standing up in front of a crowd to share their thoughts. So that's the thought, is that the parent liaisons, this is a lot of what they do, is stay in touch both with the, the very engaged parents and with the, as we say, traditionally hard to reach families. And so they're aware of which families fall into which groups and can help ensure that everyone is aware and everyone has a channel. There may be people who are thrilled to speak at a town hall. That's fantastic. There may be people who prefer to just share their thoughts online. That's there and that's fantastic. And there may be those that need a little more coaxing to be comfortable to share their thoughts. And that's where the parent liaisons would be the channel to reach out to those traditionally underrepresented folks. Kristen or Shelley, do you have anything to add to that? Yes, not. I think that captures the spirit of it.
Okay, I see one last question here at this point in time in the Q&A. And this one is specific to Covington Harper Elementary School. And the question was, there was data shared that showed neighboring schools were under 100% capacity, while Covington Harper was at 138% of capacity. Is there a way this can become more balanced should the new school not get approved for 2026? And I'm happy to speak to this question and just this will kind of tie back into the policy and regulation that we're proposing here. So Dr. Johnson mentioned earlier that there are really two mechanisms that can initiate a redistricting process in this proposed regulation. One of which is through a capacity utilization study that we share through the superintendent, shared with the board, and then the board has the ability through a majority vote to initiate a redistricting process. So with this situation, what that would look like is, as part of our capital improvement program, which we update every year, every fall, and those are largely based upon our updated student enrollment projections that we calculate. So every September 30th, my team counts every student in the school division, and that's our new baseline to use for projections over the next 5 to 7 years. So through those analyses performed on those updated projections, if things change, which they can, we would have the opportunity to say, okay, here is an opportunity to do redistricting. We prepare that, share it with the superintendent, who then shares it with the board, and then a majority vote of the board could pursue that. with this particular situation, we have a school targeted and on schedule to open in August of 2027. We are committing and striving to open that school 1 year early because, as you all know, Potomac Shores' HOA is growing significantly with K-5 students. And if we can open this school earlier, we want to do that. If we cannot open it in 2026, and nothing at this point in time is saying that it's not going to be open in 2026, but if we cannot, with a new school opening 1 year later, we would be hesitant to do redistricting in that area because we wouldn't want to make school assignment changes that we would need to undo 1 year later when the school opens. And one of the things that we heard not only in the literature, but also through community members and our PWCS staff who serve our student stability is important. And to change a student's assignment 1 year after the next, that's something that we want to avoid doing. All right, we do not have any additional questions right now in the Q&A. And I'm looking through the attendees. I do not see any community member hands up. I see Mr. Jesse, our Occoquan School Board member's hands up. So we're going to unmute him and invite him to engage with us. Mr. Jesse, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. And again, thank everyone for attending tonight. It's very helpful. The one thing I just want to say that I would like for consideration is that when we say significant change, I like the concept. I don't like the wording. I like what you were saying as a neighborhood change and so forth. That will be something I will bring up if the wording stays the same at this point, that we should be more specific. The other thing I'd just like to say is, this is and Dr. Carter can correct me if I'm incorrect, dealing with developments are very challenging because they control when they build and when they don't build. And so sometimes, we know the thing is coming, but they don't build it right away. They wait 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years sometimes before they build it. So it makes it very hard to, a school, on the other hand, it's like a cruise ship compared to a yacht. It takes a long time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy to turn that ship around, but a yacht can turn around much faster. So, do we like to be in the situation we're in now? No, but it's growing faster than I think we ever anticipated. And again, the developer determines how fast they want to build. And so we have to sort of guess when we think they're going to be building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jesse. And one more question came in. This doesn't make sense. Why would you want to make kids stay in an overcrowded classroom? And I hope that wasn't the message that was received. We do not want our students to stay in overcrowded classrooms. We want to provide capital improvements that provide the opportunity for all of our scholars to receive their education and launch their thriving futures in brick and mortar facilities. So I'm sorry if that was a message that came through. That was definitely not my intent. And again, we will be updating the student enrollment projections in about 1 month or so from now to reassess that area. Based on our projections that were calculated last year, the surrounding schools, although not as overcrowded as Covington Harper, most of them had portable classrooms already to mitigate overcrowding at them. And the schools that didn't have portable classrooms also were over capacity. So there is not a solution to provide significant overcrowding relief to Covington Harper through redistricting to existing students, or excuse me, existing schools. The solution is our Potomac Shores Area Elementary School that the board approved. And not only did they approve it, but they approved to construct the school larger just earlier this year. So that's where we're going to be able to offer students in Covington Harper the ability to not be in an overcrowded school. At this time, I'm not seeing any other questions popping in. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Would like to thank everyone for attending this evening. This webinar was recorded. We will be posting it on the website that is on this screen here. We also still have our survey where we're collecting feedback. If you think of something that you didn't have a chance to share, please scan that QR code and fill out the survey. That will be shared with our NDC consulting friends to incorporate into the policy and regulation proposal. And I want to thank NDC for being here this evening. Also want to thank my staff in planning for facilitating this meeting. And I also want to thank our interpreters who are with us this evening to reduce language barriers. And also thank you to communications and media team for supporting this and getting the word out about this community meeting this evening. I will open it up to the other panelists if there's anything else they would like to share before we wrap this up.
No, I'll just second your comments about we really appreciate the people spending the time to share their thoughts and be a part of this process.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.